Hello, welcome to Motor Mouth, brought to you by the Boyertown Museum of Historic Vehicles. I'm Kendra.
I'm Dan.
Wow.
Hi.
We are here in the beautiful 1938 Reading Diner here at the museum. And the museum is open 7 days a week from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. We're at 85 South Walnut Street in Boyertown, Pennsylvania. And we'd love to hear from you. Please visit us whenever you get a chance. We've got some great stuff here if you haven't been here already. Or if you want to get in touch with us, we have a website, www.boyertownmuseum.org, or give us a phone call, 610-367-2090. We'd love to hear any comments you have about the show, right?
Right.
It's helpful to us
It is.
to hear what you guys have to
And
say.
once in a while, I'll hear from somebody.
Yeah.
Here or there.
Yeah. So, any ideas or anything you want to tell us about the show? Please let us know and get in touch with us. We'd love to hear them. So, actually, before this airs, we're going to have another diner day here in the diner. So,
Yeah.
we're getting it warmed up tonight,
Yeah.
ready for
Yep.
lots of people.
Yep.
You know, we are, like I said, we are open 7 days a week, but we are closed major holidays, and we're going to be at a major holiday here pretty soon. So we are closed on Thanksgiving Day, but we are open again on Friday and then that whole weekend. So if you have found yourself at home with people from out of town and you need to get out of the house, come visit us on that weekend, and we'll be here. There's great stuff here to check out. So think of us over the Thanksgiving weekend. And other than that, we're going to start gearing up for holiday stuff and
Yeah.
cold weather and
I
that
saw
fun stuff.
I saw a Christmas tree out there.
there is. We already have a. It's tough for me to put Christmas trees out too early.
Well,
but
we can call it a Thanksgiving tree.
okay, that's better.
Okay.
It's because we are, I'm glad you mentioned that, Dan. We are a Toys for Tots drop-off site. So if you would like to make a donation of a new toy to that really great cause, you can bring it here. And that's why our tree's out, because that drive has already started. So
Okay.
it's a
Our
neat thing to be a
Thanksgiving
part
tree.
of. Yes, our Thanksgiving tree,
Yes.
also known as the Toys for Tots tree. So, yeah, come and actually, if you bring a toy for the Toys for Tots program, you do get a discount on your museum admission. So,
Okay.
little perk.
Okay. That's neat.
So, I think that we've been starting with our World War II stuff. So I think we'll do that again this month.
We
Don't
are.
you think? All
we
right.
are. I think so.
All right.
Yeah.
What you got tonight?
What do I have? Okay.
Yeah.
I am going to talk about a company that most of its life was in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. Jacobs Aircraft Engine Company. If you're from Pottstown, I'm sure you heard about it. It seems like a lot of people I've talked to have heard about it. It all started down in Philadelphia, a company called Fisher and Jacobs Incorporated. They made experimental engines. They were organized back in 1926, and in 1926 and 7, they did experimental motor work. And I'm going to read an advertisement. The words are small here, but I'll try to do this. It says, "We will rebuild any make of motor or make or duplicate any part of a gasoline engine. We will work out any idea you may have on a motor. We will advise whether or not your ideas are practical. We will increase the horsepower and RPMs of any standard motor." So that was from 1926 and 1927. I saw advertisements pretty much stating that. And it was kind of interesting. And I'm going to talk about Fisher and Jacobs. Well, you know what? I'll mention it right now. Fisher and Jacobs, before they became Jacobs, and they were down there doing this experimental work for motors, were known as the place to go to on the East Coast for racing engines for your Model T. So that really is neat in my it sounds like a whole show there. We can do a whole show about this
I didn't even know they were into that.
Yeah. Well, you should know this stuff. It's important.
Okay,
Anyway.
I'm going to write it down. It's my notes.
Okay. They were renamed Aircraft Engine Corporation, so they got away from the automobile engines, and they moved to Camden, New Jersey. 1931, they moved to Pottstown after buying the Light Manufacturing and Foundry Company. Okay, Light Manufacturing and Foundry Company kind of is close to us because one, that was the home of the Flying Merkle motorcycle that they made
Yes,
in
it
Pottstown
was.
for a short time. Actually, it was only made there for about 7, 8 years until it closed. Also, the Light Manufacturing and Foundry made well, they were a foundry. They cast metal parts, including aluminum engines for Daniels cars, which we have one of their engines on display kind of out of the car. You can come and see that. So there's a couple car connections there, okay? And so anyway, they moved into the now closed Light Manufacturing Company, Jacobs Aircraft Company. 1931, they developed a 3-cylinder radial engine. And for those of you who do not know what a radial engine is, it means you have a center shaft on it and you have the pistons radially out from that. But this is only a 3-cylinder engine. Not many were made, like 44 of them. 1933, 7-cylinder radial air-cooled engine was made. This is made for the military. They used it in various planes. I'm not sure which one, but they said it vibrated heavily at low RPMs. So it had a nickname of Shaky Jake, which I thought was pretty cool. You know,
Shaky
Jake
Jake.
for Jacobs and Shaky because it's... Anyway, there's another company made that engine into the 70s, which surprised me that they'd make same engine from 1933 all the way in the 70s. Between World War I and World War II, the engines, Jacobs engines, were many light U.S.-built planes used in 26 countries. They were known as the best producer of 2 to 400 horsepower engines. During the time, Jacobs started making engines with aluminum alloy pistons, and I'm wondering if that had something to do with the Light Foundry, because they had the wherewithal to make aluminum parts there. Sodium-filled exhaust valves, magnesium alloy crankcases, so they were really into the alloy stuff back then. 1941 through 1945, the War Department gave a contract for Jacobs to produce Pratt & Whitney designed engines. And those engines were called the Wasp and the Wasp Junior. I have the numbers here, but that's besides the point. They were 9-cylinder air-cooled radial engines. They were in small planes, trainers, agricultural aircraft, helicopters, even in a blimp. There was one of their engines in a blimp. And I saw some advertisements online, and I wanted to show them to you, but they were kind of fuzzy, and so you can't see them unless you go online yourself. But anyway, one of the advertisements says, "Big war story, way behind the lines." That was the headline on this. And why way behind the lines is because they were being used in training aircraft, the Jacobs engines. Another headline in an advertisement was, "In all battle areas are found bomber pilots trained with Jacobs engines." So they were a vital part of World War II.
Sure.
You know, there's all these companies all
Yeah.
over the place. I mean, we talk about Boyertown Body here, making different things. Well, there was Jacobs Aircraft.
Another one in our
in
backyard.
Pottstown. Yep. So during World War II, Jacobs plant in Pottstown, somebody told me that they would flood the roof with water, and it made it look like a pond in case any enemy aircraft would fly over. They looked at, oh, a pond. We don't want to bomb a pond, as they keep flying. So,
I've heard that was on that plant was on Hitler's bombing list.
Really?
Pottstown, yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
That's a rumor I've heard. I
Okay,
don't know
well,
how true
there.
that is, but
That's
yeah.
two things. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, Jacobs ranked 87th among corporations in the value of World War II military production contracts. So 87. I can't remember when we did the E-flag several months ago. You gave a number how many companies, and there was a lot. There was a few hundred.
It sounds like a lot, but
anyway, after World War II, it became a division of Republic Industries. The building itself was sold to Firestone Tires and the Occidental Chemical, but that I think probably came like in the 60s, I think, or maybe the 50s. I'm not sure. Okay, now we're going to shift gears a little bit, but the gears are going to kind of mesh down the road here. And it's a company called H.H. Franklin Company in Syracuse, New York. They started in 1902 building Franklin automobiles, air-cooled automobile engines. And 1933, the company was purchased by a group of ex-employees. They went out of business. 1937, renamed Air-Cooled Motors. Okay, Jacobs engines were air-cooled. Franklin engines were air-cooled. During World War II, Air-Cooled Motors, the former Franklin company, was very successful in making helicopter and light airplane engines. So that's kind of in line again with what Jacobs was doing. Let's see, 1945, purchased by Republic Aviation Company to produce engines for a light amphibious aircraft. 1947, that company, Republic Aviation Company, so we went from Franklin to Air-Cooled Motors to Republic Aviation. See, that's why it's getting confusing here. 1947, it was purchased by another company called Tucker Car Corporation.
What?
Now, that was interesting because I always heard that Tucker used Franklin air-cooled engines, you know, helicopters, and it kind of all came together here. So anyway, 47, it was built for, or bought $1.8 million to produce an engine for the Tucker automobile. After purchasing air-cooled motors, Tucker canceled all of the company's aircraft contracts. It kind of wanted to focus on making automotive engines for Tucker. Now, at the time, though, it held over 65% of post-war U.S. aviation engine production contracts. And so when they said, oh, we don't want to build airplane engines anymore, I'm sure that down in Washington they got kind of excited. Anyway, Tucker failed amongst allegations of stock fraud. If you've seen the movie, if you heard about it, okay?
Yeah.
Air-Cooled nearly failed with it, but it didn't. It operated under court-appointed trustees. 1961, still in existence. Tucker and the Tucker family sold the business to another company called Aero Industries. Restored the name in 1961 of the Franklin Engine Company. 1975, that same company, the government of Poland bought the company, moved it to some town I can't even pronounce, okay? And the name of the company is even worse, okay? Well, actually, the name of the company is called Franklin Aircraft Engines, and then it has a bunch of strange letters after it. So that's where they are now. But let's get back to Jacobs Engine. That same, I'm going to quote, this is out of Flying Magazine, 1963. It says, that same year, 1961, Berger incorporated Aero Industries, Inc. and bought Air-Cooled Motors, Franklin. Okay, the Aero Industries is what Jacobs ended up as, and the Air-Cooled Engines is Franklin. So you're having these two come together as a subsidiary. As such, it now enjoys the security that accompanies being part of a corporate family that includes Atlantic Aviation, Boyertown, Pennsylvania, Jacobs Aircraft Engine, Pottstown, manufacturer radio aircraft engines, feedback systems, and a couple other companies here. And that's interesting. It's all coming together. That's 1963. Now, I have this, I did this backwards. Okay. 1962, the year before, it said Franklin Aircraft Engine Company, Syracuse, New York, one of the oldest manufacturers in the field, has become a subsidiary of Aero Industries of Boyertown. Under new management, Franklin announces its plans, intensified sales activities, and its present line of conventional aircraft and helicopter engines. So that's kind of interesting. They're all coming, and it seems like Boyertown is now the focal point, and it doesn't talk about Pottstown anymore. I have something else to read here. A lot of reading here. Okay. Boyertown firm to move to Syracuse next month. This is out of the Reading Eagle in November of 1964. Atlantic Aviation Corporation will move from Boyertown next month. The president of Allied Aero Industries made the announcement yesterday, and it talks so on and so forth about their office, and they're moving to Syracuse. Now, Franklin was originally from Syracuse, and so they're going back there.
Back home.
And so it talks about a large percentage of Atlantic's 40 employees will be transferred, and it mentions about an office staying open at the Pottstown Airport. Now, I'm not sure which Pottstown Airport, because there's two of them outside of Pottstown. So anyway, that's it. So that was November of '64. 1 month later, December of '64, that same building, which used to be about 2 blocks from here, which is now Dollar General Store. There was a building there.
Oh,
okay.
yes.
Okay, it burned, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago.
That sounds about right.
The facility was bought by Boyertown Auto Body Works at 230 South Reading Avenue.
Yes.
So, anyway, that's a lot of companies there, a lot of back and forth and everything, but I just want to emphasize again, this area of Pennsylvania was big with World War II supplying, and in this case, it was aircraft engines.
I didn't even know there was an Atlantic Aviation of Boyertown.
I'll tell you what, it's confusing. Hopefully I got everything right, but a lot of stuff here. So.
Well, and Light, the Light Foundry, we have at the museum too, Light bicycles.
Oh, yes.
Which were built there. They were into bicycles before they got into the Flying Merkle. And I think too, Light made parts for Chadwick automobiles.
You're right.
And that's one of the reasons I think he went out of business, is because Light decided they didn't want to make them anymore.
Okay.
And he was out one of his big suppliers.
So, although a lot of this is airplane stuff, and I know every one of our viewers want to hear car stuff. There's a lot of car stuff here. The Fisher and Jacobs racing engine for Model Ts, and the Tucker, and the Chadwick, and the Daniels. A lot of neat stuff here.
Yeah.
And all mixed
They
up.
all related.
Big pot. Okay. Anyway, that's it for now.
If we want to get to car stuff, we can take a few steps outside the diner.
We can.
And we'll get something wildly different from
Wildly.
all this.
Kind of cool stuff, yes.
So we'll meet you outside the diner.
Okay, we were talking earlier, Kendra and I, about old stuff, you know, the old aircraft stuff and so on and so forth. And Kendra promised you we'd see something completely different. And we're going to see that in a minute. But first of all, let me introduce you to Sam here, Sam Fiorani. And we're going to be talking about, I don't know, one of the movers and shakers, I guess, of the automotive industry.
Sure.
Not one of the major mover and shaker, but he was a mover and shaker.
Absolutely.
And who was that?
It was Malcolm Bricklin.
Okay.
And Malcolm Bricklin was an entrepreneur in the 60s. And he created what is basically now your Home Depots and your Lowe's. He created a store called the Handyman Stores in Florida. And he set up a number of franchises, but the company went bankrupt. And Malcolm took the money that he had made from there and started another sales business by selling scooters.
Scooters, okay.
He found some scooters in New York State and ended up selling those. They were in a warehouse in New York. Started selling those scooters. And after he sold all the scooters that nobody could get rid of, he went back to the company who made these in Japan and found their products and their cars in Japan and decided he was going to start importing their cars. And that was the Subaru 360.
Subaru, okay.
So the 360 was a tiny little car.
Okay. This is like full scale, isn't it?
This is almost full scale.
Almost
It's
full
just
scale.
off, yes.
Okay.
This is a 1 to 2, yes. And the 360 was such a small car that when it was brought into the country, it was technically a motorcycle.
Okay.
The law at the time said that under 1,000 pounds, it's a motorcycle. The law today says under 4 wheels, it's a motorcycle.
Okay.
But because it was a motorcycle, you didn't have to have all the safety equipment, which was a good thing because this car is so small that this bumper here would be about half the height of a standard American car.
Okay.
So Consumer Reports did not like this car at all. They gave it a completely unsatisfactory review because if a car hit the Subaru, it would slice it in half. It was such a tiny car.
But it was still legal to drive them in this country.
Legal to drive.
How about that?
So they got away with all the safety equipment, and the problem they found was after Consumer Reports bashed it, they couldn't sell any of them. So Malcolm Bricklin and his partner had to get out of Subaru. So they sold all the cars by selling them to gas stations and such as race cars. You build
Okay.
a little track, and you could rent these cars out and race them around. They built fiberglass bodies for them so they could repair them.
Okay.
But they went back to Subaru and said, you're never going to sell a car in the United States again if you don't give us your bigger car. So he got the bigger car, which became the Subaru FF in the US.
Okay.
But part of bringing that over, they kicked Malcolm Bricklin out of the company. After they kicked him out of the company, he decided to build his own car.
Okay.
And that's what we have today.
Oh, we got one.
So let's talk to Dave here. Dave, introduce yourself.
My name is Dave Wenzel, and this is my 1975 Bricklin SV1.
The Bricklin was his namesake car. And Malcolm Bricklin was very into safety at the time. That was the advertising for the car. The big bumpers on the car, and the safety gullwing doors, and the original safety paint on the car. Everything about the car was designed around making it safer.
And you mentioned the bumpers, for instance. I mean, I look at this. I mean, this is a bumper, okay? This is a bumper, and you can see the way it's made here. You can see probably kind of telescoping inside of the body here. So
But you can tell
it's very
that
safe.
in '74 when they had the bigger bumpers in the U.S.
Oh, yeah.
Typically, the bumpers wrapped around the body, so that the law stated if you were in an impact of 5 miles an hour,
Right.
it couldn't hurt the body. And the easy way to do that was to wrap bigger bumpers around there. Well, this one has them inside the body, so it doesn't hurt the body when you have a 5 mile an hour
Yeah.
impact.
So, and you mentioned also something about the colors of it, and they had impact colors. Now, Dave, you said this was originally a different color.
Yeah, this was originally what they called safety red, which
Okay.
was really an orange color.
Orange.
And the bodies were actually made out of acrylic, and the color was impregnated into the acrylic.
Yeah.
But the acrylic doesn't hold up very well in the weather and the elements, so I had all the acrylic replaced with fiberglass, and it's a painted surface.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Dave and I were talking earlier, and you know they molded the car, whatever color it was. For instance, your car was orange, and so this is a kind of custom paint job, I guess you'd say. Really neat metal flake blue on this. So, and you say you kind of get razzed a bit from the Bricklin owners.
Yeah, Bricklin Club meets, the owners like to keep things as, you know, stock as they can. So usually they want them when you recreate them in fiberglass to have them painted original.
I think they're jealous of you. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, the original set of colors were all safety something.
Yes, safety
white,
red, safety white.
Safety suntan, safety green. Blue was not on the palette.
Was
This is a
okay.
beautiful color.
So what other safety things are there within this? Didn't you say there's some sort of a roll cage or
Yeah, there's
something?
an integrated roll cage, they call it the bird cage,
Okay.
which allows it to withstand rollover type accidents.
Right.
And they did a lot of studies where they put like 2-ton weights on the roof and it wouldn't even crack the windshield.
Really?
So they're very safe. They don't have cigarette lighters and ashtrays and any thing that would be deemed a distraction to the driver.
How about that?
That was the great thing about the brochure. It mentioned not having the ashtray and the lighter. It said,
Wow.
because we don't want you dropping your cigarette in your lap and crashing our pretty car.
Wow, that's kind of a positive thing, positive way of talking. That's interesting.
Yeah, no, but-
Sounds like something I would come up with for a TV show too. So,
But the cars have a lot of AMC parts in them.
okay,
And originally ran on a AMC 360 V8. But that was only the first year. And
Okay.
Dave's car is a 75.
okay,
And because of emissions, they couldn't put the AMC engine in it.
okay,
So 75 and 76 models have the Ford 351.
okay. So, is this a fun car to drive? Is it tough? Is it fast? Is it fast?
It's not as fast as like a muscle car era car.
Okay.
This is more of an oil embargo era car, so it lacks horsepower.
Okay.
But it's fun enough to drive. when it runs.
It seems like it would be light enough.
It is.
It's sort of like, what do you mean when it runs? I caught that.
I have a lot of problems with it.
Okay.
A lot of problems.
Such as what?
Well, for the biggest thing is you can't really drive Bricklins in the rain due to the way the doors are configured. With a regular standard non-gull wing car, rain, unless it's driving, won't get past the weather stripping. Here,
Right.
a downpour, all the rain kind of channels in there, and the electronics sit right behind the passenger seat. So in rain, you can pretty much assume that it won't start until it dries out.
Oh, okay.
And that's just one of many things.
And I heard it raining a little bit earlier.
It was raining a little bit earlier, which has me nervous trying to get
So,
They are also prone to overheating, and there's a big electronics block right in a bad spot next to the engine. So when I had first bought it, driving it home 20 minutes, it overheated along 422. And when it overheated, the electronics kind of gave out. The doors flew open right in the middle of 422. The lights came up, it stalled. It was just quite a crisis.
I'm glad you made it.
yeah, and you figure 422, there's not a lot of shoulder room there. So if all of a sudden your door goes flying out,
Yeah, it's
fortunately
Yeah.
you kept your doors.
yeah.
So,
I told Dave the story that I was at the Hershey Car Show this summer. And one of the shows that I judge at, as I walked in, there was a Bricklin on display. I'm like, oh, I got all excited. This is one of my favorite cars of all time. I get to see this and walk up next to it. I said, is that a 74? I said, yes, it's a 74. He goes, is it a stick? And the gentleman from the museum said, well, of course it's a stick. Like, sticks are rare, as we were talking. Sticks were only available in 74, and less than half the production were sticks. I said, is there a chance I can drive this back to the museum? Yeah, I think we can arrange that. I don't like Bricklins anymore after my drive,
oh,
but it's still one of the prettiest cars.
yeah. And now you're also saying about the doors. Now, I read this afternoon about air-operated doors, pneumatic, and you said originally they came with hydraulic mechanism.
They were originally hydraulic doors, which meant the doors opened very slowly, and they had to open together or close together.
Okay.
Most people converted theirs over in the early 1980s. Mine was converted over much later than that to a pneumatic system, so it has an air compressor actually in the front bumper.
Okay.
And that will allow it to open and close much faster, and you can open and close them independently as well.
And it looks like you sort of have a slight problem with that too. It seems
Yeah,
like
I
one
have-
side
I have
sagging.
a persistent leak in my
Yeah.
system, and I'm really hesitant to have to take it apart
Yeah.
to figure out where it is, so I'm just kind of living with it right now.
I knew someone who had one who had a prop rod.
Yes.
They would just park it underneath the door.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. But you said you had Malcolm Bricklin in this car.
I had Malcolm Bricklin in this car at a Bricklin Club meet in Hershey in 2015, yes. He came over, and I have aftermarket seats in mine, and he wanted to sit in the aftermarket seats. And when you get into a Bricklin, you kind of flop into a Bricklin due to the way that the doors are configured. And he was sitting in there, and when he went to get out, the natural thing is to get some leverage, and when he reached back, he hit the door close button, and the door came down, hit him right in the head, and he kind of fell backwards. And of course, everybody was concerned that, I might have killed Mr. Bricklin. He was fine, but as my wife said afterwards, it was poetic justice. He built these doors, and he suffered from them.
Wow, a tough crowd. So, yeah.
Yes.
So you're kind of hesitant to drive it, I guess, because you do have, you've had problems with it, but it's still, I'm sure you get the looks, you get people thumbs up, beeping the horn, the whole deal, so.
Yeah, it definitely, it's an attention-getting car.
Yeah.
I do drive it about 2 or 3 days a week
Okay.
to work. But I don't work far, though, so if it leaves me sitting on the side of the room, I can walk. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always a concern that it's going to leave me sit somewhere.
So now, well, let me ask you, what happened to Malcolm Bricklin after the Bricklin automobile?
Well, he built the Bricklins in 74 and 75. There were
Right.
3 model years of them. They were built in New Brunswick, Canada. And there was a lot of money invested in the company between the province and Canada and investors. And in 75, when they ran out of money, everybody was left on the hook for owing millions of dollars. So he was run out of Canada. And he has since worked on a number of other automotive ventures. In the 80s, he imported Fiats. After Fiat stopped importing cars, he imported the Fiat Spider and the Fiat X19
Okay.
and sold those for a number of years before finding the real gem in his quiver,
I know where this is going.
the Yugo,
Yeah.
one of my all-time favorites. And he imported the Yugo until Yugo of America folded or was absorbed by Yugo itself. And he took his money and ran. And has since been working on other ventures, like importing cars from China. He went back to import what Yugo has become. At one point, he was working on importing those again.
Okay. So he's still around?
Yes.
He's still with us? Okay.
Yes, well, he has met him just last year.
Yeah, okay, yeah, okay.
Yes.
2015, yeah.
Yeah, so we've been waiting for his latest venture. He is, they made a documentary about him called The Entrepreneur, and it was made by his son, so it's very pro
Okay.
Brooklyn. But he lost the Chinese deal. The Chinese decided to go with a larger company, and I believe that was part of the movie as well, as to how he had been hoodwinked by the Chinese when they decided to break his contracts and go talk to someone else.
Yeah. I mean, you said this documentary was done by his son, and it was pro-Malcolm
Yes.
show. And I'm thinking, just hearing people who do this, he started out with the hardware business, I guess, and, he imported this thing and that thing and made his own car, and now he's trying to import other things. And I just think that, that's kind of an interesting life.
Absolutely.
So,
No, he
and,
sold thousands of cars. There
yeah.
were 2,875 Bricklins built. He imported thousands of Fiats over the years, and Yugo was actually very popular its first 2 years. So he did bring in a lot of cars and sold more cars than many entrepreneurs who wanted to build their own car.
Okay, yeah. So what else can you tell us about this car? I mean, you drive it slightly now. You say it not real fast, but it comfortable to drive, and you get the
It's
thumbs
comfortable
ups
to
and
drive.
stuff. Yeah.
I had it after about 2 years. It's difficult to find people that are willing to work on cars like this.
Right.
So I trailered it myself down to Virginia, where the chief engineer that built all the Bricklins, his name was Terry Tanner. He died last year. He worked on it for 2 years and rebuilt it from the ground up. And that's kind of what he does for us, for a hobby down there.
Right.
He has a staff of people. And I went down there, spent some time with him, learned a little bit of the ins and outs of how they work and how to maintain them.
Yeah. So it gave you more confidence, even if you do have a problem, you say, well, okay, it's this and this and this. So.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Now I'm gonna lay a question on you here, or lay a statement on you. You're gonna have this at Duryea Day next year?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
You all heard it. Did you hear that? Okay.
It'll either be at Duryea Day or along the side of the road going to Duryea.
Give a thumbs up as you pass.
Yeah. Well, Dave, thanks for bringing it. I really enjoy it, and this is neat. Sam, thanks for coming also and giving us the history of Malcolm Bricklin and all his adventures. We'll say automotive adventures. So
Great.
okay. So we were just talking when the camera went off about the DeLorean, and somebody commented about how this looks like the DeLorean, and you had, what did you say about that?
Right, so these were built in 1974 and 75. The DeLorean was, I believe, 1982
Okay.
in that region. When Bricklin went into receivership, he needed to sell to raise assets, and they sold some of the intellectual property, including the designs for the Bricklin, to John DeLorean, and he used that as the basis for the DeLorean.
Yeah, and I always thought the cars were similarly shaped, but I never made a connection between them until now. So this is pretty interesting.
The basic shape, but the underlying parts, this is front engine and rear drive, whereas the
Right.
DeLorean was rear engined. And
Okay.
it under the body, they're completely different,
So,
but they
okay.
have the same basic look
Okay.
to them.
And then you mentioned about, you know, the doors. They had quick opening doors. There was a small person in the back in the movie Back to the Future.
So in Back to the Future, that DeLorean still had the hydraulic doors on it.
Right.
They didn't create the pneumatics yet, and the hydraulic doors are very slow to open and
Right,
close.
as you mentioned.
And in the movie, they're very fast. And they actually had a small individual that was kind of wedged in the back out of view with a 2x4, and he was lifting the door open real fast to get that effect. And then they added the sound effects post-production.
Okay. And then one last thing about Back to the Future. Somebody just said that on that movie, they predicted the Cubs were going to win the World Series, but in 2015, right?
2015.
Okay. And so they just won last night as of this taping. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. Had to stick that in there. Little baseball stuff. So what we're talking about now is the modernization of some of these real old cars we have. And we have our two SGVs, two fine drivers behind the SGVs. We have Kendra and James, the driver. And what I'm going to talk about is the lights, the headlights on them. And back in like 1910, 1911, 12, something like that, they had acetylene gas lights. And the older cars, they had acetylene generators on it, which would create the acetylene gas, and you lit it with a match and so on and so forth. Then they progressed to something like this. You see this tank down here, that's Prestolite, probably Prestolite, which is pressurized acetylene gas, which did the same thing for the lights. Well, in the mid-teens, they started putting electric into cars. And so if you had a car like a 1913 SGV and it was 1918, you didn't want to look old-fashioned, so you electrify your headlights. Make it a lot easier on you, huh?
That sounds like a good idea.
All right. So, and what brought this about is this SGV, the headlights actually have the little gas nozzles on it for the acetylene, but it also has a light bulb in it. And so I started doing some investigation. You could get adapter kits for it and such. And I'm going to be talking, that's what I'm going to be talking about. And before we talk about the acetylene, I found a bunch for oil lamps. So we got oil lamps such as something like this, and other things, the tail lights, they would have been oil or kerosene. And basically what it was, you had a little electric light bulb with a wire coming out, of course, and you have like a spring clip, and it would just clip inside inside the lens, and you could just turn it on like an electric light. You know, normally there'd be a switch on your dashboard somewhere, and that's it. And you had the Tillery adapter. That was 1917, converts oil lamps to electric, made in Oregon, Missouri, and especially for tail-mounted Ford oil lamps. There was another one, Western Auto. It was 2 tail lamps conversion units, oil to electric. It cost you $1.35 to do that. Ooh, okay. Okay, now, if that wasn't enough, that's just talking about the little oil lamps that you'd see like up here in the cowl or your tail lamps. Sears and Roebuck, or Sears, Roebuck and Company, in 1918 had electric headlight assembly for a Ford Model T. And that would cost you $4.95, and it would be the headlights, all the wiring, switches, everything. And that was, I guess, a pretty good deal. So that was $4.95. The main one I want to talk about is the Fitzall adapter. You get that? Fitzall. Yeah, it's spelled
F-I-T?
Z-A-L-L.
Okay.
But it's pronounced Fitzall, so it fits everything, okay? And it would be a little clip, and again, you would clip it right here on the inside of the light. You see on the post there, it would clip on similar to the way that is, and it would be electric, and that's it. And it was pretty easy to do. And the way you do that, that means you could run it with the gas, or you could run it with electric. It was made by a company out of Chicago called A. Nelson Manufacturing Company. You got that, James?
I did.
It will be on the quiz, okay. But it was sold, and here's an interesting thing here. It's sold by the wise man of Reed Street, Charles E. Miller. And I got a catalog here, and Kendra is holding it. It's a catalog from, what was this, 1916. He was a big deal in auto parts store for accessories and parts and such. He had stores in about 15 different cities all over the place, and very interesting. And I have something to read about that. But before I read that, I'm going to tell you the store everybody thinks of around here that's been around forever is what? Pep Boys. Very good. Okay. Pep Boys.
Started in Philly.
Started in Philly. The original Pep Boys were Manny Rosenfeld, Mo Strauss, Jack Jackson, and Mo Radovich. Four friends in August 1921 chipped in $200 apiece and started a store called Pep Auto Supplies, and it was named after the Pep valve grinding compound. They changed the name of their store from Pep Auto Supplies to Pep Boys because police officers would stop a car for not having the oil wick burning during nighttime hours. And he said, go see the boys at Pep for a replacement. 1923, they saw some business out west using the owner's first name, so they changed it to Manny, Mo, and Jack. And that cigar, remember the cigar? They quit that in about 1980. They had that. So anyway, that was part of it. 1990, the cigar was removed. That's it. Okay, so that's the place everybody thinks about. That was some little trivia stuff. How was that? Pretty good?
That was good.
Okay. All right. Let's get back to Charles E. Miller. And he had this catalog. He built all this stuff. And I got something to read about that. And let me get this here.
And there's everything in here.
There is everything. That's pretty cool.
I'm looking through here. It is pretty neat.
Yeah, pretty neat. And I like that catalog that she's looking at because it's not just a listing of stuff, but it's kind of good explanations what's going on with the product. Very good descriptions of it. Okay. Okay. So this is the Charles E. Miller, the wise man of Reed Street, or Chaz E. Miller. It says, somewhere in the faraway dim past said that if a man moves too often, he never moves in good society. And it would be difficult to find a saying which more concisely and correctly estimates the value of permanent address. Perhaps that's why everybody in automobile circles knows Chaz E. Miller, and why the location of his famous headquarters at 97 Reed Street, New York City is so familiar that it might be left off his future catalogs without in any way diminishing the volume of letters received which are correctly addressed. The wise man at Reed Street, someone recently called Chaz E. Miller in connection with exceptionally shrewd move in purchasing, and when one considers his reputation as one of the best, if not the very best, short buyers in the country, the term does not seem out of place. Okay, that's Charles Miller. And he started in 1896. He started his business on this Reed Street. And it was the center of the wholesale shoes district. And he comes in and starts this business. It was also the height of the bicycle craze. So he started with bicycles, but even while he started, he was thinking automobiles. And he started selling auto parts there. And as I said, he ended up in about 15 different cities and went into the 1920s and he sold his business. But he was distributing 100,000 catalogs annually. And I read somewhere that I believe it's a letter in the front of this catalog coming from an organization, and they say, we want to advertise in your book because you got so many readers and it'll help us there. And what is that there?
From the Horseless Age. Yeah,
Horseless Age magazine wanted to advertise in his book because it was reaching so many people, and I thought that was interesting. So anyway, that's a little bit about Chaz E. Miller, and his slogan, or their slogan, was, we either carry it in stock, we'll get it, or it isn't made. Now, I looked up, I'm always interested in New York City, like Manhattan is like really neat. And you go on Google Maps, and I typed in 97 Reed Street. Well, he was actually 97 to 103 Reed Street. Right now, 101 Reed Street is the home of a bicycle shop. So I thought it was kind of interesting how everything went around. Gotham Bicycles. So anyway, that's the story about headlight adapters, Fitz-all adapters, and Charles E. Miller, and some other things. So we've come a long way.
Oh my, yes.
Yeah.
Why did you modernize his car, not mine?
I think this one was modernized. Well, it's a good question. This car, I believe, is modernized, and I'm not sure if how old these headlights are, the light bulbs, so. But I believe this car was used for touring at one time. And a lot of times, if you see these old cars at a show, and they use them for touring, driving a lot on the road, they'll adapt light bulbs to it, and they do some other things to make them a little safer than from when the cars were made.
Yeah.
So.
Satisfactory explanation.
I have the unsafe rattle trap
Unsafe.
here.
Well, there's handles on the back seat so you don't get
Yeah,
knocked
remember
out.
Dan and I rode in this car in Pottstown, and I sat in the back, and that's when I realized that one of those handles is not attached.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
a little iffy there for a moment.
Well, we went slow.
Over the railroad tracks was a big bump.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was slow bump.
I think I bumped higher than the seat.
Yeah.
It's a very tiny seat. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna move on to somewhere.
We're going to
another
move
location
mosey on
here.
back to the diner, maybe?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay.
Sounds like a worthwhile idea.
Are you ready to close the show out with a kind of a Kendra thing?
I am.
If you don't mind. Last month we talked about Texaco Star Theater.
Yeah.
We did.
Yep.
And that was inspired by an earlier show that we did about the Johnson Wax program, which of course was Fibber McGee and Molly. And I came across an article by pure chance this past month since we filmed that was really interesting. And it's not automotive, but it does tie to those topics. So I happened to find this article about the DuMont network.
Oh, okay.
And do you know what the DuMont network was?
I've heard about it.
Well, if you haven't heard of it, it's very interesting. Alan DuMont, it's named for, he worked for Westinghouse back in the 30s, and but he was interested in the new television technology that was starting to be developed. And he tried to talk Westinghouse, which did radios. He tried to talk them into getting into it, and they weren't interested. So he quit his job, and he set up a lab in his house, and he perfected the cathode ray tube, which is what takes the signal and makes it turns it into a visual for your TV. So it's really pretty much the most critical part of the television.
Okay.
And he perfected it. He basically, before he improved upon it, they only lasted a few days. They'd burn out. They'd have to be replaced.
Okay.
So his improvements made them last indefinitely, which is a good thing for the TV industry because who wants a thing in their house that they've got to fix every couple days, right?
Right. I'd
So
take that.
that would be a pain. So he sold his patent to RCA, and he made a boatload of money on that. And he wanted to go into kind of building and then selling TVs himself, but he realized that nobody was going to really want to buy a TV if there was nothing on it to watch. What's the point? So he decided to build his own network, the DuMont network. He named it after himself. And in 1944, he got a broadcaster's license. And his first station he set up in New York, and the second one was in Washington, D.C. And he connected them to his lab in Passaic, New Jersey, with 200 miles of coaxial cable. Guess who's from Passaic, New Jersey?
Shirelles.
No. Corporal Agar in an F Troop.
Oh. I should have known that. Well, Shirelles are from Passaic.
Are
too.
they?
Yeah.
Oh, fabulous. See?
Soldier Boy and all that.
Yeah. See,
Okay.
all the things you learn here.
Yeah.
And his first broadcast that aired on these two stations was on August 9th, 1945. It was a news bulletin that the U.S. had dropped the bomb on Nagasaki. That was his.
That was the first one.
That was the first one. So now we're getting into World War II here now a little.
Yeah.
Briefly.
Yeah. Yep.
Touch back on
And
that.
it was done by an airplane.
It was.
Yeah.
Maybe with a Jacobs aircraft engine in it.
I think they just made smaller engines. That's okay.
We're trying to tie it together as best we can.
Oh, sorry.
So Dumont, obviously, he was a small fish here compared to CBS and NBC. They had radio programs that they adapted to TV, like Texaco Star Theater, like Fibber, McGee, and Molly. They had nationally known stars like Milton Berle, like Fibber, McGee, and Molly, like Amos and Andy, all these shows that people already knew were tuning into. And he didn't have any fancy studios either. So he hired a lot of New York comedians and actors, like Jackie Gleason.
I was thinking all along.
Yes.
I think Jackie Gleason was
He
part of
did.
this.
He was on Cavalcade of Stars, which is one of their shows, and that's where he started the Honeymooners sketch.
Yep,
So
that's
Honeymooners
awesome.
got their birth on this show. And he filmed his TV shows in unused rooms of the Wanamaker's store in Broadway.
How about that?
That's what he did. So he didn't have a lot of this technology that the other people did. But it's interesting because that also means he wasn't really beholden to anything. He could kind of do what he wanted. He didn't have all these executives of CBS that he had to please. He didn't have old radio programs that he had to make work. I mean, he had to totally come up with everything on his own. And he didn't have sponsors of shows. So those two shows that we talked about before, Texaco and Fibber McGee, were sponsored entirely by one company. They didn't advertise any other products during those shows, and they typically tried to combine the product into the show somehow. We maybe would think of that as product placement today, maybe. But that's what they had to do, and then they had to make their sponsors happy too. He didn't have to do that. And because of all this, and he had so much freedom really to do what he wanted, Dumont Network had a lot of firsts. And I mean a lot. Like, I don't even have time to list them all. They were really interesting. The first soap opera, the first religious program, the first network to televise sporting events. I mean, there's so many. But the big one.
Oh, go ahead.
Here's the big one. His method of TV advertising. So he didn't get one sponsor for a show. He would sell blocks of time in either 30 seconds or a minute to different sponsors per program. So he'd have maybe 5 or 6 people advertise on one show. And this is how we do advertising in TV today. We've moved away from the model that was on Texaco Star Theater and on Fibber, McGee, and Molly. And this is how we do it now. So for better or for worse, we have Mr. Dumont to thank for that. But like I said, it's not car related, but I thought that was all very interesting. And the guy that broke that mold, really. And the network stopped broadcasting in 1957, actually. It wasn't. So around 12 years or so. The last show that was broadcast on there was his religious program. What was it called? Life is Worth Living, I think it was called. It was his most popular program. It was basically a Catholic priest kind of giving sermons.
How about that?
Sort of. But those old studios, and he did end up having them all over the East Coast at least. He had, the one that saved him for so long was in Pittsburgh. Because for some reason CBS and NBC took a while to get to Pittsburgh, even though at the time that was in the top 10 cities, populated cities in the United States. And Pittsburgh is what saved him because he kind of had a monopoly out there. It kept him going a lot longer.
About that.
But a lot of the studios then were kind of used to build the Fox network then later on.
Okay.
So
Speaking of that, the studios and stuff, I remember seeing an old Honeymooners episode, and you can picture, for you viewers, maybe you can picture they were always pretty much in the same room there, and they had the table and stuff. And you're looking at the corner of the room, and the corner became separated. There was a gap about like this, and you could see somebody behind it kind of take it and put it back together real quick. So, you know. So
I mean, he
thought that
didn't
was
have all this fancy
Yeah.
stuff, but it made him be more creative, and he
Yeah.
came up with so many. There was just a list of things that he was the first one to do, and they're all pretty common today. It's all common stuff you see on TV today.
And you know, we always talk about cars here, and you look back in the beginning of the car industry, and people were trying all these different things, and a lot of them are still around today. And then I guess that's the same way it was TV. It's this whole new medium to broadcast out there, and you know, I'm sure he had stuff that flopped too.
Oh yeah, he did.
Oh, he did. Okay.
There was some weird stuff too. There was
Yeah.
one show I read about, and it said sometimes he came up with some weird stuff. And there was one, I forget what it was called, but it was basically the night editor of a newspaper acting out stories, like news stories.
Oh,
like
okay.
weird. There was some weird stuff too that didn't go
Okay.
anywhere. But there were a lot of stuff that he came up with that are just staples today. And
Yeah.
the advertising was the big one. Which
What
I
was the
thought
first sports
interesting.
thing? Do you know? Did it tell you?
I think it was boxing.
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah.
I guess that
gotta
was
read that
easy because
again.
you have one camera and you can kind of cover
Pretty
the whole
much.
thing.
Yeah, it's a small area. It's not like a
Yep.
big field.
Arena, yeah.
So,
So,
yeah. So that's my Kendra thing for this month.
okay.
And with that, I guess we're going to close up here for the night, and we'll see everyone in December.
Yep.
Not sure what we'll have then.
Yeah, we have a couple things up our sleeves.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So we will see you all in December, and have a happy Thanksgiving.